Welcome to Chills with Chas. We are going to start Chapter 2, Indiana. First off, I would like to thank everyone for all the likes on all my previous videos. Thank you so much. It is greatly appreciated. We will start Chapter 1, or Chapter 2, should I say, with Diana of the Dunes. And we'll start off with this intro. In the eerie flickering glow of a kerosene lamp, Matthew Larch followed his son's footsteps in the snow. They started at the kitchen door and extended some 75 feet from the house. There were no other marks on the freshly fallen flakes. Young Oliver's tracks just stopped. The oak water bucket he had carried lay on its side several yards to the left. Matthew Larch huddled under the dark sky with a small group of family and friends. Not a word passed among them. They listened intently, but could scarcely believe their senses. Oliver was crying, his voice growing fainter and fainter as he screamed for help. Screamed from somewhere above them in the black, cold sky. The abduction of Oliver Larch. Okay, Diana of the Dunes. The naked young woman walked nimbly across the sand dunes, sheltered by the groves of black oak trees that shut out the sun. Emerging on the beach, she stopped to watch the shore birds, tottering on long, spindly legs as they searched for breakfast at the water's edge. But when plunged into the frigid water, she swam as gracefully as a dolphin. Her strong, swift strokes carried her body effortlessly through the water. After swimming back to shore, she raced over to the sand to get dry. Next, she stood erect, raised her arms, and tilted her face to the sky, as if giving thanks for the glory of the day. Then she vanished across the dunes in the direction she had come. Who was she? She was called Diana of the Dunes. From 1915 until her death in 1925, she lived in the then wild and rugged Indiana dunes country that hugged the Lake Michigan shore. She must have lived and died in obscurity. Had someone not seen her bathing naked? Perhaps it was a fisherman casting a line, or a seaman far out on the water, turning binoculars toward the shore. But word soon spread about the nude, bronzed goddess of the wilderness. The press, sensing a story, sent reporters in search of the goddess. East of Gary, where there was virtually no habitation, they found her living in an abandoned fisherman's shack. She granted an interview, then another and another, always gracious. She was still a private person who pleaded to be left alone. For nearly 70 years, the story of Diana of the Dunes had been printed and reprinted, with the variations in newspaper and magazines. It may be the best known legend of the Hoosier state, or Hoosiers, I don't know. Even today, visitors say that there is now Indiana Dunes State Park report seeing the ghosts of mysterious Diana hurrying over the sands at twilight, or hearing sobs coming from the ruins of the old shanty that was once her home. The line between myth and reality is finely drawn, and while legend and truth do share many aspects in common, they also decidedly differ in others. What follows is the legend of Diana of the Dunes. Diana was born Alice Mabel Gray, the daughter of a prominent Chicago physician. She was well educated and well traveled, and she had held secretarial jobs. But a broken love affair shattered the young woman's world and sent her into the remote dunes country. Supposedly, she arrived in the dunes with only the clothes on her back, a glass, a knife, spoon, blanket, and 2 guns. After sleeping on the sand for several nights, she discovered a deserted fisherman's shack and moved in. Driftwood served as furniture. At first, Alice lived on fish she netted and wild fruits and berries. In time, she sold berries and fruit, wine, to earn money for essentials. Wearing stout boots and khaki clothing, she trudged many miles to Miller, Indiana, for food and library books. People who came to know her said she was shy, but always kind and courteous. The same could not be said for some of Alice's neighbors. As she roamed the dunes, studied, read, or wrote, voyagers made her life a hell of dodging and hiding. Fishermen, knowing that a young woman swam naked year-round and ran on the beach to dry, found excuses to visit her beach. When one fisherman's wife learned of her husband's habit, she stormed Alice's shack to protest. Alice, with a gun in hand and a half-wild dog by her side, warned the wife away. In 1920, a man joined Alice, a mysterious person named Paul Wilson. He was described variously in press accounts of the day as a Texas rattlesnake hunter who had read about the woman and came north to woo her, an ex-convict with a police record for armed robbery in Kansas or Michigan City, ne'er-do-well. He was tall, strong, resourceful. He improved the little shack immeasurably, peddling fish he caught and sold handcrafted furniture. Their finances improved, and Alice was content. She could not know that violence would destroy this promising new life. In June 1922, dunes hikers found the ghastly remains of a man near Alice's shack. He had been strangled to death and partially cremated on the beach. Paul Wilson was the chief suspect. He was known for his hot temper, his great strength, and his strong dislike of strangers. When Eugene Frank, a deputy hired to guard dune cottages, confronted an angry Alice and Paul, a fight took place. Paul was shot in the foot, and Alice's skull was fractured by the butt of a pistol. Police arrested Paul and Deputy Frank. Alice was transported to Mercy Hospital in Gary, where she hovered near death. Someone vandalized the shack while the couple was gone, taking all of Alice's books and manuscripts. Meanwhile, Wilson deepened the murder mystery by telling police that an insane, gun-toting hermit named Burke might be their man. Burke had a twisted foot, and Wilson claimed he had been Burke's seen brick tracks near the murder scene, but by then any telltale tracks that had been trampled upon by police, reporters, and morbid sightseers. Bert couldn't be found. Was he the victim? If not, who was? And why was he slain? The body was never identified, and the case never solved. Paul Wilson was exonerated, probably. Can't read. Alice was discharged from the hospital, but never fully recovered from her injury. Harassed by sightseers, she and Paul moved a few miles further east, but progress closed in on them. A new housing development known as Ogden Dunes was being built around their makeshift shack. Alice and Paul dispossessed again, went to Texas, but returned within a year. Alice had contracted ermic poisoning. On February 11, 1925, Alice Mabel Gray died in Paul Wilson's arms. Knowing she was dying, she asked to be cremated, with her ashes scattered over the sands she loved. But no facilities were available, and the authorities refused to let Paul make a funeral pyre on the beach. Alice was buried in Gray's Oakland Cemetery, but a reporter who searched for the grave 40 years later never found it. Not even a cemetery worker were certain of location. In death, this sensitive and gentle woman found at last the privacy she sought so desperately in life. 5 years after her death, Paul Wilson was convicted of robbery and taken to the state prison at Michigan City. Was it Alice's Paul? No one knew. That's the legend of Diane of the Dunes. However, the real story of Alice Gable Gray differs in a number of respects. Alice Gray was no legendary beauty, romping naked in the sand dunes. She did bathe in the lake, of course, for she had no other facilities. But a ravishing young lady? Hardly. She was 34 years old when she first went to live in the dunes, and was described as exceedingly plain and tiny. Alice had graduated from the University of Chicago, a member of the Phi Beta Kappa Honor Society, an unusual accomplishment in an era when few women sought higher education. No value was placed on a woman's intellectual achievements. After graduation, Alice took the only job she could find, editorial secretary of an astronomy magazine. But it wasn't a broken love affair that caused her to leave Chicago. In an early interview, she told a reporter that her eyesight had begun to fail and a physician had given her the wrong medicine, which made it impossible for her to continue the close work her magazine job required. She chose to live in the Indiana Dunes because it was a familiar place. She'd been there many times and had in fact written a naturalist dissertation on the area while a student. Hardly the stuff of legend. And Paul Wilson? He was actually a skilled boat builder and a handyman. He and Alice shared an uncomplicated life of simple pleasures. Saddened by her untimely death, that was the real story, until 1981. And that year, a researcher who had spent years pursuing the story of Alice Mabel Gray and Paul Wilson turned up well-documented information. His findings are, in a sense, even more lurid than the legend. While Alice died of emetic poisoning, she also died of massive blows to her abdomen. Alice was buried in a cemetery plot with other bodies. No wonder the reporter couldn't locate her grave. The gravekeeper was convicted of burying several persons in the same grave. Alice's manuscripts had actually been taken from her shack and preserved by her relatives. Paul Wilson was never married to Alice. He was married to another woman. Paul Wilson was actually the illegitimate son of a distinguished La Perte County family. Wilson was not his real name. Wilson had a lengthy criminal record. After being released from prison in California, he was shot to death while stealing a car. Later, the astonishing story from California seemed to support at least one of the researchers' findings. In the winter of 1982, issues of Dune County magazine Marguerite Bell Johnson wrote a detailed account of her association with Alice Mabel Gray. When Johansson. When Mr. Hansen was 12 years old and growing up in Michigan City, Indiana, she said she babysat for Alice's children. She recalled that the house at 309 Finley Street was a shabby framed bungalow with sagging porch and dingy windows with cracked green shades. Inside, a barren room held 2 chairs and 2 small rustic pedestals. Toys littered the floor. Mr. Hansen, who was known as Margaret, described her first meet with Miss Wilson, whose real identity was unknown to her. The faded smock did little to disguise the ungainliness of her body. Yet she crossed the worn floor in old moccasins, as quiet as if barefoot. Her hair was shapeless, untidy, long and dark, pinned back carelessly from features clean cut as a coin. It was a proud, arresting face. The eyes deep set, as if with a secret, a special knowledge. She had a naive delicacy that had nothing to do with social elegance. Dreamy, whimsical, absent-minded, she would start to do something, See something else to be done, forget the first errand, and finish nothing. Margaret would earn 10 cents an hour for looking after Alice's daughter, Bonita, 2 afternoons a week after school. Margaret recalled that the child looked perhaps 7 years old. She had long, coarse black hair, set in an oval face with high cheekbones. Bonita said her father was an Indian who had been shot and killed. Her mother had told her that, she said. Margaret was puzzled. She knew of no Indians closer than northern Michigan. Bonita also had 5 names, the last of which was Wilson. Alice and the child seemed nervous and frightened around Mr. Wilson, and little Margaret was nervous too. She wrote, the breadth of his chest, the size of those hands, was a little frightening. His hair, overlong and thickly blonde, coiled and curled around his ears, like the hair of gods in the mythology books at home. His small and curious eyes were china blue, devoid of warmth or even interest. No answering expression appeared on that sullen, shut-in face. The family lived mostly on stale bakery goods. Margaret understood that Mr. Wilson was a wood chipper, yet she never saw any wood chipper's tools in the house. Or woodcutter. And it was unlawful to cut trees in the dunes area. Because of Margaret's uneasiness in the presence of Mr. Wilson, Alice promised never to leave the girl alone with him. Alice and Margaret soon became close friends, in that rare and wonderful way in which sometimes a child and a mother relate to each other. The other woman enjoyed Margaret greatly and confided in her. She told Margaret about her years at a girls' school in Massachusetts, and complained about the way society treated women, keeping them ignorant and complacent in a world made for men's pleasure. Margaret didn't always understand what Alice meant, and thought sometimes the woman was crazy. On a November day, Alice told Margaret not to come for a while. She'd be going to Chicago to Michael Reese, lying in a hospital to have her baby. Margaret and her mother thought it was odd for her to go so far. Poor people had their baby at home, and the poor people had their babies at home, and the Wilsons were poor. After the baby was born, Margaret returned to the Wilsons. The new little girl was named Bluebell, her eyes the exact shade of the flower that colored the dunes in spring. The family was now poorer than ever, and Margaret was often embarrassed to take money she knew they couldn't afford. Then came the day Margaret would never forget. As she entered the Wilsons' house, fear tightened her throat. Bonita was nowhere to be seen. Alice, on the verge of tears, stood wringing her hands. The bedroom door crashed open, and Paul Wilson thundered out of the room. By God, he yelled, his face red and blotched, and stormed out of the door. Margaret looked at Alice. Bruises were beginning to show on her arms and wrists. A gentleman would strike a lady where it didn't show, wouldn't he? Alice said, her eyes wet. Alice sat down and wrote a note for Margaret to take home to her mother. Margaret noted the fine, delicate handwriting. She would never have dared to unfold the sheet of paper, but she knew somehow that she would not be working for Miss Wilson any longer. Margaret's mother read the note and called on Miss Wilson. Returning home, she drew her daughter aside. "She's the woman they call Diana of the Dunes," she began. "I'm sorry for her, but of course I can't let her go there any more." She paused. "She needs help. She has a family, but she'll never go to her own people. Poor creature." The definitive story of Alice Mabel Grey may never be known, and perhaps that's as it should be. All the women ever wanted was the right to be left alone. Like Henry David Thoreau, Alice Grey lived her life moving to the tune of a different drummer. And some say that Alice has never left her beloved dunes, that by the light of the full moon her ghost stands silhouetted on her beach, giving thanks the glory of the night. Alright, that's it for that one. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.